Hey, folks, welcome back to the Lincoln Project podcast. Our guest today is Preet Bharara. We are recording this on Friday, August 2nd. It won't be airing according to the schedule until next Thursday. But I want to say this. Between now and then, we're going to have a vice presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. Between now and then, we're going to see the fundraising totals really start to impact what people are thinking about the race. Trump raised about $140. Harris raised about $310 million, which I find it hard to say the words $310 million. Because my first campaign, my first big national campaign, 1988, President Bush spent $54 million on the whole campaign, nationally, everything, all of it, all in. So raising $300 million in 2 weeks is quite a remarkable achievement. That's inflation. But so the content of this podcast will probably be a little different, but it is so always we're talking to Preet. He is so smart. He is so considered as a thinker. And he really always brings a perspective to not only politics, but the way law and politics interact. So we're delighted to have him on the show today. And we're delighted to have him as a friend of the pod. I also want to just remind everybody on the front end this time, we are all dependent on you liking, following, reviewing, giving 5 stars to the podcast, all those things, because the algorithm never sleeps. And we've been exploding in popularity on all the charts, and I'm deeply, deeply, deeply honored by everyone's support in that regard, and everyone sharing the podcast and sharing the content. I am so touched by it. I really I get emotional about it, and folks have been sending in the nicest letters and notes about it, and I think it's because we're really in the moment where people appreciate these conversations and they appreciate the connection that they can draw to their lives, to the things we're talking about. So with that, I want to thank you all once again. Please like, subscribe, do all the things. And with that, on with the show, and welcome to Preet Bharara.
Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
Good night, and good luck.
Hey folks, it's Rick Wilson, and welcome back to the Lincoln Project podcast. My guest today is Preet Bharara. You have seen him many times. He has a terrific podcast of his own, but you've seen him as one of the foremost experts on legal issues in this country. And I'm delighted he came on the podcast today because I want to talk about a couple things that I've been following in the news in the last few days. And I want to lead off with something that broke on Friday when we're recording this. And when you hear this, folks, it'll be 89 days to the election. We will have a VP candidate. But Preet, there was a Carol Winning story in the Washington Post today about a wide-ranging investigation into whether or not Egypt paid Donald Trump a $10 million bribe. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, about that investigation sort of petering out, mysteriously seemingly at the hands of Bill Barr, surprise, and sort of the idea of, are we still going to keep learning things that were going on about Trump's corruption? It's now almost 4 years since he left office. It just struck me as a kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I think we need to wait to see what other information and evidence comes out. Mm-hmm. As much of a critic of Donald Trump as I am and have been, I'm always careful not to leap to a conclusion.
Sure.
When there's one article about potential malfeasance, it is sometimes the case that foreign governments and malefactors, whether through campaign finance violations or bribery or any kind of other illicit conduct, are trying to get some result. It doesn't necessarily mean that the people that they're trying to support and help, and I've seen this in cases that I oversaw myself, are in on it. It could mean they're in on it, but the fact that the investigation appears to have commenced during the Trump administration is a good sign that at least in certain ways the department was independent, and in other ways, obviously, as we learned, especially towards the end, it wasn't. But I kind of wait and see. And you raise a really interesting point. How can it be years later we're still learning of various things that went on in the first Trump administration, which I think is another cautionary tale as to why maybe this person shouldn't be back in office again?
Well, I think that it's part of a mosaic of reasons why he shouldn't be back in office, and I think that there are a lot of folks who who have watched the behavior of Donald Trump in the almost 3 weeks now since Joe Biden left the race, as a guy who is sort of increasingly not working out. He's lost some of his mojo as a candidate. He's lost some of his the feeling of inevitability.
Because of the amazing events of the last 35 days, which are completely unexpected. I mean, he had about as much mojo, to use your phrase, that any major party nominee has had, I think, in decades, as recently as 40 days ago.
Yep.
I'm just going to make one more point about the article that you mentioned. You know, I'm a lawyer. I used to be a prosecutor. Sent many people to prison, investigated lots of cases. And so, you know, I cover now in the podcast and otherwise the various criminal cases, right, against Donald Trump, the civil cases against Donald Trump, the 2 impeachments against Donald Trump, the special counsel's investigation of Donald Trump. But I'm always careful to say when a new allegation comes up, whether it's proven or not, that it's not these criminal or civil cases that are going to mean the end politically to Donald Trump. That has to be done at the ballot box. So I do want to caution people also when it's important to cover, it's important to know the facts. But I do think that there's a subset of the population who understandably sees upon every new allegation of malfeasance as a thing that's going to bring Trump down. And I think that has proven to be an error time and time again. I mean, the man is convicted of 34 counts in New York, and he's still, you know, the nominee of his party and still has a very, very good chance of being the next president. So I don't want to minimize this misconduct. And I think it's important to talk about as a function of, legal analysis and accountability and the rule of law. But to the extent people morph that into it's going to be the death knell to him politically, that's a mistake.
I have written about that for the last couple of years over and over again, telling my Democratic friends, do not count on a miracle. Do not count on a meteorite coming out of space and knocking this guy out.
And that meteorite is not going to be named Jack Smith, and it's not going to be named Bob Mueller, and it's not going to be named, Letitia James. You got to vote against the guy.
Yeah, no, but I think that's absolutely one of the most fundamental, missing elements with a lot of folks who have found him so inexplicably difficult to defeat and understand how to beat him that they forget that the way to beat him is to go out and do the work. And I think that, my sense of the campaign right now is that doing the work is paying off for Vice President Harris right now at scale.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
Am I allowed? It's your podcast.
Of course.
Did you predict in any way, shape, or form this level of quality of the rollout of Kamala Harris?
Absolutely not. I had a sense of concern bordering on dread that the handover of the campaign, doing a hot swap, switching one pilot out in the airplane for the other is never easy. And I had a very nervous disposition that the campaign would not be as harmonious as it has been. And in fact, it has exceeded my expectations so much that I think it really speaks to the professionalism of the team that President Biden built, and their dedication to understanding that you have to run an extraordinary campaign to beat Donald Trump, not just a regular campaign.
Yeah, Kamala Harris was ready. Look, and it was my view, it was my hope that the reason that people had, not the highest opinion of Kamala Harris, her popularity ratings were lower than what you would want and lower than some recent vice presidents. But my view had always been that was based on low. My view was that was always based on low information. She just wasn't as prominent. She didn't have as much attention brought to bear on her. And then once she got the introduction and she handled it masterfully, the world changed.
I think that's exactly right. And I'd written about her one time that this was a woman who, she might have been a 125 hitter a lot of the time in these debates, but sometimes she would go in and knock the ball right out over the back wall and you'd never see it again. Like when she was delivering in the 2020 campaign, she was delivering at a very high level, but it wasn't consistent. What I've seen now is that either through just political maturation in the vice president's office, or a sense that this is her moment, she has been quite an extraordinary campaigner ever since the President Biden made his decision. And I think that's also, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Trump's mania and disconnection seems to be rising in direct proportion to her skill on the campaign trail.
No, 100%. And I think one reason, this is my own, theoretical speculation, as to why she's so great at the moment and masterful, to use that word a second time, is she's in a different position. Right. So her whole, and I, by the way, I should mention, I've known Kamala Harris for a long time, and I've had the proverbial beer with the candidate, just she and I together. And she's terrific, and she's a warm and funny and exceptionally smart person. But in 2020, when she was running for the Democratic nomination, obviously in the primaries, the people who vote are a little more left. They don't love prosecutors as much as the rest of the population might.
Right.
And particularly in that year, although I think she'd already dropped out of the race at this point. But, she kind of shed her prosecutorial credentials. Mm-hmm. She didn't emphasize her track record as a DA, as an attorney general, someone who cared about rule of law issues and criminal law issues and public safety issues. Now she's running in a general campaign. It's a few years on at this point, and the person she's running against is a convicted felon. So right. When she gets up in front of a huge crowd at a rally, she has like a beautiful set of zingers that she can use, and she has credibility making those zingers because of her record and expertise and background as a formidable prosecutor. She has this riff where she outlines all the kinds of cases she's done, prosecuted sex offenders, prosecuted people who have committed fraud for their own gain, and she goes on. And then she says in dramatic form, "So believe me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type." That's a killer line. Mm-hmm. Because she's bootstrapping her experience as a prosecutor, and it just makes her more comfortable. It makes her more credible, and it's complete red meat to her crowd.
Well, I also think that there's a degree to which I also think there's a degree to which she has an ability to alleviate some of the typical Republican concerns by being that prosecutor, by being able, and especially I think if they ever do get on a debate stage, which I think is a 50-50 chance for Trump to accept at best, she's able to articulate a case and able to talk about her record in ways that go beyond the sort of like Trump bravado. I'm tough on, I back the blue. She can really talk it in a way that's real. And I think that will help a lot of Republicans, understand that she came from, she was, as a Californian friend said to me the other day, he goes, she was almost too tough for California.
Right.
And I thought that was a really interesting observation, because that really speaks to something that she was elected twice statewide, and too tough for California was kind of a line.
Can I pick up on something you said a minute ago about Trump becoming more unhinged, perhaps because he's facing Kamala Harris? And this is an issue that has been very upsetting. This is an issue that you can imagine has been kind of upsetting to me, and it's caused a lot of texts and emails among my community of friends. And maybe you've guessed what it is. This whole idea of whether Kamala Harris is Indian or Black is so, I'm an Indian American, a very proud Indian American. Sure. My kids are 3/4 Indian. Many of my kids' friends are half one thing, half another.
Sure.
The population of biracial people in this country, multiracial people in this country, is the fastest growing demographic in the country. And my question is, it's sort of it's half an observation, half a question. When Trump throws that out there,
right?
Is there a logic to it? Who does he think it plays to? Is the theory, the best theory I can come up with, if you want to give it some logic, and it's offensive and annoying and horrifying and either racist or borderline racist regardless, is that he's trying to make her out to be an ethnic identity politics opportunist? Is that I really don't get it.
I have a slightly different take on it, Preet. My theory of the case is that Donald Trump has reached the point where he doesn't have a lot of inner monologue anymore, and he just says what's on his mind. I think he's desperate. I think he's panicky, and I think he knows that his own base and that the Fox and MAGA media ecosystem would take up that attack and go further than he could go with it, and they have. You've got Seb Gork out there calling her colored. You've got these other people, claiming she's only Indian or only black, and she's faking the. And
it's just so like
it's just so disconnected from America.
It's so ancient in its thinking. Look, I'm to share a personal family anecdote.
Sure.
This weekend, a cousin of mine is getting married, Indian American, my mom's brother's child.
Mm-hmm.
He's marrying a white woman.
Mm-hmm.
We expect, will have children and have a very wonderful, fruitful life. It's a wonderful, beautiful couple. And their kids are going to be half Indian and half white. And at this wedding, there are portions of the wedding where I and my family will be in Indian dress, right? Traditional Indian dress. And there are portions of this weekend when we will be in Western style dress. Yep. People will be wearing tuxedos and people will be wearing suits in the same weekend to celebrate the joining of two people who love each other, one Indian American and one white American. So this idea that you have to be one or the other is ludicrous, and why it's not dismissed roundly by everyone is also upsetting to me.
I do think there's a deeply seated anxiety among a lot of the people who support Donald Trump. And you see it articulated to try to gussy it up to sound like it's an actual demographic theory, the whole white replacement theory, where they believe there's some conspiracy against white people in America who have it really hard, as you probably heard, and that idea has some traction with them. And look, the nativism argument flies in the face of the fact that the American ideal is that we are propositional, not ethnic, not blood and soil. And I've always found that merger of cultures in America, that sort of providential way in which people come here and a generation later their kids are pretty American, and 2 generations later their kids are deeply American, and the ethnicity and the race doesn't matter in a fundamental way. But I think there are people in his coalition that respond to that. I think it's an ugly segment of it, and I will be, look, I'm tough on Trump, folks. But I will say, I think an awful lot of people that are generic Republicans are uncomfortable by this language, and they're made very uncomfortable by the idea that they're being lumped in with the white nationalist types.
Yeah, I mean, do J.D. Vance's kids have to think, in the Vance family, they're having family dinner saying, okay, well, now we have our cue from Donald Trump. Kids, you have to pick being Indian or white. Right. Or whatever the European lineage of J.D. Vance. I mean, on his own ticket, his own vice presidential pick has biracial children, and half of that is Indian. So I don't know what he's thinking. There
was some muttering during the convention from some of the far right types, like, oh well, now I don't know. He's in a marriage that doesn't represent our values. I'm like, your values? What are you even talking about? Entrepreneurship, hard work, family? What? What's missing from this equation in your minds? But it is, like I said, I think there is there's a moment here we're experiencing on the affirmative side with Vice President Harris, that people for the first time in politics in this country, and honestly, since before I can think of, they feel happy. They feel like somebody who's like them and is optimistic and representing the future we all know is coming. I just feel like she's got she's touched a certain nerve of people who needed some optimism.
She came at the right moment. Look, for Democrats, and I can say this, I think there was a lot of turmoil in the lead up to President Biden withdrawing from the race. And I think it's fair to say, I don't want to upset anyone, I think it's fair to say that the people who in good faith and in good conscience, mightily argued against Biden withdrawing because they thought that would be electorally disastrous. Those people were wrong.
Yeah.
Those people were just wrong. And I don't blame them. I don't disparage them. They were just wrong. And you see that in retrospect. And I think the rest of the Democrats were in such a state of despair about the election. I mean, all the Democrats I was speaking to put the odds of Biden beating Trump at approximately 0%.
Sure.
0%.
Sure.
And then, they despaired and they thought he was going to drop out. And then he didn't. And then they thought he was going to drop out. And then he didn't. And then he finally did after a pretty long and tortured process.
Mm-hmm.
And the feeling of relief and elation was insane. It was an insane amount. And that's what's, undergirding her popularity also, combined with, an excellent, happy warrior face. Yeah. And everyone coming together. I mean, you ever predict all the Democrats, including eventually Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Barack Obama, all her potential rivals, that just, the morning of the withdrawal of Joe Biden, people were reasonably, political experts were speculating about who would throw their hat in and challenge her at an open convention. And none of that happened. None of that happened.
I think part of the open convention stuff was this wish casting on the part of the Republicans that the usual thing Democrats have been notorious for doing, form the circular firing squad and blow up the opportunity before them. I think that it has actually shocked them in ways that really have gone pretty deep into their psyche. That everybody in the Democratic Party, from progressives to moderates, are pulling the oars in the same direction, and the boat's moving, in the right way. I find that to be, I find it very heartening, frankly, that they were able to discipline themselves and do this, because that has not always been the Democratic Party's strong suit.
Trump is a very unifying force in the Democratic Party.
He really is.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about where you see the federal case, which is your area of expertise, the Jack Smith, the documents case.
Yeah.
That appeal, it is apparently on a fast-ish track. Talk to us a little bit about where that stands, because I'm wondering if we're going to end up going into September, October with Donald Trump once again under some legal pressure. I
don't think that's going to happen. So just to remind folks, there are two Jack Smith criminal cases, one in D.C. relating to the election, and one in the Southern District of Florida relating to the documents and his keeping of them, sensitive and classified documents. That case in Florida has now been completely dismissed by Judge Eileen Cannon, who was appointed by Trump himself. And the basis on which she dismissed the indictment was she found it was a constitutional violation of both the Appointments Clause and the Appropriations Clause for Jack Smith to have been appointed because, not to get in the weeds, but he has sufficient power as an officer of the United States that he needed to have been appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, and he wasn't. And some other special counsels, under her analysis, would be okay and remain okay. For example, David Weiss, who's a holdover U.S. attorney from the Trump administration, but presidentially appointed, Senate confirmed, who's a special counsel in the case relating to Hunter Biden. That's okay, but Jack Smith is not. Now, she is alone and unique in that reasoning, but she's the district court judge, and the case is now gone. The appeal is under sort of quasi, fast track, but I don't think Jack Smith has asked for a fully expedited review. And in part, I think that's the case because it's so late. We're already in August, that even the most expedited review would not resolve this issue in time for the election. I mean, it takes a while to brief. It takes a while to argue. It takes a while for the panel to come up with a decision. Then, depending on which side wins, the other side can move for the full 11th Circuit, the full appellate court to review it. Then it can go to the Supreme Court. So I think Jack Smith must understand that the only way he's going to be able to proceed on either of those two federal cases is if Donald Trump loses the election. Otherwise, he's going to be sent packing, I hate to say, on January 20th.
Right. I think that is an inevitability, that the rule of law is not high on Donald Trump's list of priorities as we go forward. So
yeah, I mean, they ran out of time. They ran out of time.
He ran out the clock. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about in the very beginning. It's like, don't expect miracles to take out Trump. It's got to be an electoral victory.
Yeah. I remember people spent all this time on the 25th Amendment when Trump was president, and those things, the impeachments were important. The Mueller investigation was important. But there's no, as you say, there's no silver bullet. And, if everyone spent, all the time they're spending hoping for that silver bullet and worked instead on the election and getting out the vote, there would be, I think, a more hopeful result.
Well, I think like a lot of people, I feel a lot better than I did 3 weeks ago. And I feel a lot better than I did even last week. I think,
but there could be, look, we still have much more time remaining.
Oh, yes.
Than the last 37 or 38 days
which
multiple nutty things happened.
That's always something you have to watch out for. Is there's always a chance at the end of the day that some externality comes up and hits you from the side. Look,
you kind of have to, otherwise hit
Trump that way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, the writers who are writing the dialogue and the plot line for this series that still has like several episodes to go, they got to do something. So my prediction, thinking of it from a dramatic arc standpoint, is J.D. Vance has to go. Like, what other plot twist that we can anticipate? There
is inside the Trump campaign right now, there is a world where they want J.D. Vance to go. There are people there that want him out.
And that would, by the way, be the least of like half a dozen crazy things to have happened in this election cycle. If J.D. Vance were to be replaced,
the amplitude and frequency of craziness in our political world, it just keeps getting, going up and up and up. There's no element in our politics anymore that's sort of predictable. And of course that's how things are going to happen. For a nation that has had a relatively stable political system for 240 years, the last 8 have sort of upended an awful lot of the expectations about rationality and consistency in that system.
Yeah.
So, well, Preet, I wanted to thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, folks, Preet Bharara he has a fantastic podcast. Stay tuned with Preet. And he is a really thoughtful guy about the law and about its impact on Americans and about its impact on American life and politics. I think you ought to follow that podcast. It is terrific. He's also got a great book called Doing Justice, A Prosecutor's Thoughts on Crime, Punishment, and the Rule of Law, which is, I think one of the things I really admire about you is you are committed to the rule of law. You are committed to that fundamental procedural level of it that if we lose it, it's hard to ever get it back. I want to thank you again for coming on the show. Tell folks where they can find you on social media.
Thanks, Rick. It's a delight and a pleasure to be with you. Enjoy your commentary also.
Thank you.
Social media, I'm on the Twitter, I guess the X, at Preet Bharara. I'm on Instagram. I am not on TikTok.
No, me either. I'm 60, man. I'm not going on TikTok.
It's like my kids think I'm too old to smoke pot and to go on TikTok. I said, I never have. I said, maybe I should try. Now it's being, legalized everywhere. And they're like, no, Daddy.
I tried it in 1985 and never again. So
It's fine.
Anyway.
Thank you, Rick.
Good night and good luck.